I'm Alexandra, 32 years old, and I never thought a simple text from my dad would unravel my entire family dynamic. Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. His words stung, but my calm, understood response hid the storm brewing inside me. Little did he know that removing my name from our $1.5 million loan would send his world crashing down. 68 missed calls later, I realized standing up for myself was long overdue. If you're watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to set boundaries with difficult family members. Trust me, this story might give you the courage you need. Growing up in suburban Boston, my relationship with my father, Richard, was always complicated. He was a successful business owner who built his construction company from the ground up, and he never let anyone forget it. Money was both the tool he used to control others and the measuring stick by which he judged success. Everything in our household revolved around his financial decisions, his business achievements, and most importantly, his approval. My mother, Eleanor, was the buffer between his controlling nature and my childhood innocence. She was gentle and artistic traits that my father tolerated but never truly appreciated. I remember her teaching me to paint on Sunday afternoons, while Dad was at the office catching up on work he claimed couldn't wait until Monday. Those peaceful moments with watercolors and canvas were my escape, a small world where his rigid expectations couldn't reach me. When I was 11, Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. She fought hard for 2 years, but eventually the disease took her from us. I still remember sitting in the hospital room holding her frail hand as she made me promise to always follow your heart, Alexandra, even when it's the harder path. At 13, I didn't fully understand the weight of those words, but they would become my guiding light in the years to come. Dad didn't know how to handle grief or single parenthood. His solution was to throw himself even deeper into work, leaving me with a rotating cast of nannies and housekeepers. Less than a year after Mom's passing, he met Diane at a business networking event. She was sharp, ambitious, and shared his materialistic values. Within 6 months, she moved into our home. By the time I turned 15, they were married. From the beginning, Diane made it clear that she wasn't interested in being my mother. "I'm not here to replace Eleanor," she told me bluntly during our first awkward dinner together. "I'm here because your father and I are building a future together." That future, as it turned out, didn't have much room for memories of my mother or for me. When Bradley was born during my sophomore year of high school, the shift in the family dynamic was immediate and painful. Dad, who had barely attended my school events, suddenly found time to be present for every moment of Bradley's life. He proudly carried photos of his son in his wallet, something he'd never done with my school pictures. 2 years later, Amanda arrived, completing what Diane often called their real family unit. Throughout high school, I threw myself into academics, hoping that perfect grades might finally earn my father's attention. I graduated as valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Princeton for business and finance, and waited for the pride I so desperately wanted to see in his eyes. Princeton Dad scoffed when I showed him my acceptance letter. "I was hoping you'd attend my alma mater and then join the family business. This feels like you're deliberately choosing to move further away." He wasn't entirely wrong. Part of me was seeking escape, a chance to build an identity separate from the cold shadow of his disappointment. The scholarship meant financial independence, something he couldn't control. When I packed my car to leave for New Jersey that August, Diane didn't even come out of the house to say goodbye. Bradley and Amanda, 7 and 5 at the time, waved from the window, already being trained to see me as the outsider. College became my sanctuary. I flourished in the finance program, made genuine friends who valued me for who I was, not how I performed, and slowly began to unravel the unhealthy patterns I'd internalized from my family. By the time I graduated with honors, I had multiple job offers from prestigious firms in New York. I chose a position as a financial analyst at Wilson & Burke, a decision my father called settling for being an employee instead of an entrepreneur. Over the next decade, I built my career methodically, climbing from analyst to senior advisor, developing a reputation for ethical financial strategies and clear-headed crisis management. Each promotion brought congratulations from colleagues and silence from home. Family gatherings became increasingly strained affairs where my accomplishments were minimized while Bradley's college football career and Amanda's social connections were celebrated as family triumphs. 5 years ago, during a rare dinner when I visited Boston, Dad revealed his plans to significantly expand his construction business into commercial real estate development. The opportunity is perfect, but the banks want additional security on the loan, he explained, sliding a document across the table. Given your financial expertise, I thought you might co-sign. It's $1.5 million, but the return on investment will be substantial. Something in me wanted to refuse immediately, but the part of me still seeking his approval saw an opportunity. Maybe being part of his business success would finally bridge the gap between us. Maybe this was his way of recognizing my financial acumen, of finally seeing me as valuable. I'll need to review all the paperwork, I said cautiously. Of course, he replied with a rare smile. You always were thorough, just like me. That tiny crumb of approval was all it took. After reviewing documents that seemed in order, I co-signed the loan, becoming legally entangled with my father's business in a way that would later prove to be far more complicated than I imagined. Last Thanksgiving marked the beginning of the end, though I didn't recognize it at the time. After 2 years of dating Jasmine, an environmental attorney I met through a mutual friend, I finally worked up the courage to bring her to the annual family gathering. We had grown serious moving in together 3 months prior, and hiding this significant part of my life felt increasingly dishonest. Are you sure about this? Jasmine asked, as we drove through the familiar neighborhoods of my childhood. Her fingers nervously adjusted the collar of her navy blazer. From everything you've told me about your father. It's time, I said with more confidence than I felt. Besides, you're brilliant, successful, and charming. What's not to love? The initial introductions went as well as could be expected. Dad offered a stiff handshake, Diane a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Bradley, now 22, and working at my father's company, made small talk about the Patriots season, while Amanda, 20, home from her sophomore year at Boston College, assessed Jasmine with the calculating gaze she'd Brigley's somewhere inherited from Diane. Dinner started pleasantly enough with discussions about safe topics: the unusually warm fall weather, the traffic on the Mass Turnpike, the renovations Dad had made to the house. I began to relax slightly, thinking perhaps I had misjudged how the family would react to Jasmine. Then came the first pointed comment during the main course. So, Alexandra, Diane said, cutting her turkey with precision, I ran into Margaret Wilson at the club last week. Her daughter Sarah just got engaged to that cardiologist she's been dating. Beautiful ring church wedding planned for June. They're already looking at houses in Brookline. I nodded politely, recognizing the familiar pattern. Diane often used my childhood acquaintances as weapons, highlighting their conventional life choices as implicit criticism of my own path. That's nice, I replied neutrally. Sarah and I haven't kept in touch since high school. Such a shame, Diane continued. You two were so close once. I always thought you'd be each other's bridesmaids someday. I felt Jasmine tense beside me, but gave her a reassuring smile. We had discussed these tactics beforehand. Dad cleared his throat. Speaking of the company, Bradley just closed that deal with Westbrook Developers, brought in a $3 million contract. Bradley straightened in his chair. It wasn't just me, Dad. Your reputation opened that door. Don't be modest, Dad countered. You've got the family business sense. Some people have it, some don't. The implied comparison hung in the air. I took a slow sip of water, refusing to take the bait. Amanda jumped in. Bradley's being promoted to VP of Operations next month. Dad's already had new business cards printed. Congratulations, Jasmine said warmly, attempting to ease the tension. That's impressive at your age. Thanks, Bradley replied, studying her with newfound interest. What did you say you do again? Environmental law, Jasmine answered. I work primarily on corporate compliance cases. Dad's expression darkened. One of those lawyers trying to strangle businesses with regulations. Actually, Jasmine responded evenly. I help companies navigate environmental requirements while maintaining profitability. It's about sustainable business practices, not obstruction. Sustainability, Dad scoffed. Just another buzzword for charging consultation fees. I put down my fork. Jasmine's firm has saved their clients millions in potential fines while helping them implement greener practices. Always the defender, Alexandra Diane remarked with a thin smile. So passionate about certain choices. The emphasis on the word choices wasn't subtle. If you're referring to my relationship with Jasmine, I said carefully, it's not a choice, it's who I am. The table fell silent. In all the years of subtle digs and passive-aggressive comments, I had never directly confronted them. Dad put down his knife and fork with deliberate slowness. This isn't appropriate dinner conversation. I didn't bring it up, I pointed out. But since we're here, yes, Jasmine and I are together. She's an important part of my life. Your lifestyle is your business, Dad said stiffly, but in this family we have certain values and traditions. Richard Jasmine began respectfully. I understand family traditions are important. With all due respect, Dad interrupted, this is a family matter. The clear implication that Jasmine wasn't family and never would be hung in the air. If she's not family, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, then neither am I. Bradley looked uncomfortable. Come on, Alexandra, no one's saying that. Aren't they? I challenged. When was the last time anyone from this family showed genuine interest in my life? When was the last time my accomplishments were celebrated the way yours are? Here we go with the victim narrative, Diane sighed dramatically. Just because we don't applaud your every decision doesn't mean you're not family. It's not about applause, I said. It's about respect. Basic human respect. Dad's face flushed with anger. You want to talk about respect? How about respecting the values I raised you with? Bringing your situation into this house around your siblings. My situation, I repeated incredulously. You mean my relationship? My happiness? Call it whatever you want, he snapped. But in this family we believe in traditional values. I laughed without humor. Traditional values, like family loyalty, support unconditional love, because I haven't seen much of those traditions. That's enough, Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. I won't be lectured about family in my own home by someone who's clearly rejected everything we stand for. I stood up, napkin falling to the floor. And what exactly do you stand for, Dad? Because from where I'm standing it looks a lot like judgment and conditional acceptance. Jasmine gently touched my arm, a silent reminder of our agreement to stay calm. I took a deep breath. I think we should go, I said more quietly. If you walk out that door, Dad warned, you're making a choice about where your loyalties lie. I looked around the table at the faces of my so-called family. Bradley looked down at his plate. Amanda studied her manicure. Diane wore an expression of vindicated disapproval, as if she'd always known I would eventually reveal my true disappointing nature. My loyalty is to truth and to love, I said finally, and to the people who accept me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I took Jasmine's hand and we walked out, the sounds of Diane's disparaging whispers following us down the hallway. In the car, the tears finally came. Jasmine held me as I sobbed, years of suppressed pain breaking through the carefully constructed walls I'd built. I'm so sorry, she whispered, stroking my hair. I'm so sorry they can't see how amazing you are. Over the next few weeks, I made several attempts to reach out. I sent a carefully worded email to Dad expressing my desire to find common ground while also standing firm in my identity. No response. I called Bradley, hoping to enlist his help in bridging the gap. He was polite but distant, claiming Dad needed time to process. Christmas came and went without an invitation home. I sent gifts for Bradley and Amanda that were acknowledged with brief formal text messages. The family photo Diane posted on Facebook showed them all smiling in matching sweaters in front of the fireplace, no empty space to indicate anyone was missing. By February, the silence had solidified into something that felt permanent. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling that had taken up residence in my chest. Jasmine suggested therapy, and I finally agreed, beginning the long process of understanding my family dynamics and my own part in perpetuating unhealthy patterns. Spring arrived with no thaw in relations. I had almost resigned myself to the estrangement when the annual email about the summer family reunion circulated among the extended family. As usual, it went to all the cousins, aunts, and uncles on my father's side. For the first time since the tradition began 20 years ago, my name was absent from the recipient list. It was a warm Tuesday in June when I realized I hadn't received the annual family reunion email. The gathering had been a tradition since before I was born, bringing together the extended Walker family at my grandparents' old lake house in New Hampshire. Even during the most strained periods with my immediate family, the reunion had always been neutral territory, a place where the broader family connections somewhat diluted the tension. Maybe it went to your spam folder, Jasmine suggested when I mentioned it over dinner. I checked, finding nothing. It's fine, I said, trying to convince myself. They probably just forgot to include me. But the next morning, my cousin Grace called. We'd always been close, despite the geographical distance between Boston and her home in Chicago. Alexandra, something weird is going on, she said without preamble. Uncle Richard told Aunt Patricia that you weren't coming to the reunion this year because you were too busy with work. But then I heard from Taylor that you weren't invited at all. My stomach dropped. I never received an invitation. Grace's silence spoke volumes. There's more, she finally said. Dad overheard Uncle Richard telling Grandpa that you've been making lifestyle choices that don't align with family values, and that's why you wouldn't be there. The blatant lie burned. He's uninvited me, and is telling everyone it was my choice. I'm sorry, Grace said softly. It's not right. Several of us have said we'll skip if you're not welcome, but Uncle Richard is being stubborn. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the wall. The rejection wasn't just from my father anymore. It was an official family excommunication, complete with a narrative that made me the villain. My phone buzzed with a text. My father's name appeared on the screen, and for a brief moment hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe he'd reconsidered. Maybe Grace's mention of family members threatening to boycott had changed his mind. The message crushed that hope instantly. Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. Cold, blunt final. No explanation, no room for discussion. Just a door slammed shut in my face. I stared at those words until they blurred. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it difficult to breathe. This wasn't just about a summer gathering. It was about belonging, about identity, about whether the people who shared my blood could simply decide I no longer existed in their world. My first instinct was to call my best friend Stephanie. She'd known me since college and had witnessed every up and down of my family drama. He can't just erase you, she said fiercely after I explained the situation. You're his daughter, for God's sake. Apparently he can, I replied, my voice hollow. What are you going to respond? I considered my options. I could write a lengthy explanation defending myself. I could angrily confront him about his lies to the extended family. I could beg for inclusion. None of those options felt right. I think I'll just say understood, I finally decided. That's it, Stephanie sounded surprised. What else is there to say? He's made his position clear. Fighting it only gives him more power. After hanging up, I typed that single-word response. Understood. My finger hovered over the send button for several seconds before pressing it. The simplicity felt both empowering and devastating. Later that evening, Stephanie called back. I talked to my cousin Megan, who's dating one of your second cousins, Robert, she said, her voice tight with anger. Alexandra, they've been talking about you at family gatherings for months. Your dad's been telling everyone you've become radical and unrecognizable. He's painting you as having abandoned the family, not the other way around. Each word was a fresh cut. Why would he do that? Control the narrative, I guess, Stephanie replied. But there's more. Megan said Robert mentioned something about your dad's business expansion hitting some rough patches. Apparently there's been talk about financial troubles. This caught my attention. What kind of financial troubles? She didn't have details, just that your dad had been complaining about banks and loan terms at the last gathering. And get this, he never mentions your role in helping secure the original loan. According to him, he did it all himself. The pieces started falling into place. The expansion loan I'd co-signed, my father's increasingly defensive behavior, the convenient family estrangement that kept me from asking questions about the business. Something wasn't right. I need to find out what's happening with that loan, I said, suddenly alert. The one you co-signed. Wouldn't the bank notify you if there were problems? Not necessarily. All the paperwork goes to the business address, and I only get the annual tax documents. A sick feeling was growing in my stomach. If there are financial issues and I'm still legally tied to that loan. You could be liable, Stephanie finished my thought. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My father wasn't just cutting me out of the family emotionally, he was potentially leaving me exposed to financial risk without any information or control. The betrayal reached a new depth. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading my father's text. Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. The finality of it, the coldness. And my simple response understood. But did I really understand? Was I seeing the full picture? Was this rejection purely about my relationship with Jasmine, or was there something more calculating behind it? By morning I had made a decision. If my father wanted to cut ties, we would cut all ties, including financial ones. His text had given me the clarity I hadn't been able to find on my own. It was time to protect myself not just emotionally but financially as well. I looked up the number for Michael Lambert, the attorney who had helped me with my home purchase the previous year. It was time to understand exactly what my options were regarding that $1.5 million loan. Michael's office was in a renovated brownstone in downtown Manhattan, the kind of place that exuded quiet confidence rather than flashy success. I'd chosen him originally because of his straightforward approach to legal matters, and I needed that clarity now more than ever. Co-signing a business loan of that size creates significant exposure. Michael explained after I'd filled him in on the situation. His expression was grave as he reviewed the loan documents I'd brought. Especially with the terms outlined here. What do you mean? I asked, leaning forward in the leather chair across from his desk. This clause here, he pointed to a paragraph midway through the document. It states that co-signers are jointly and severally liable. That means if your father's business defaults, the bank can come after either of you for the full amount regardless of who they think is more likely to pay. The implications sank in slowly. So, even though I have nothing to do with the day-to-day operations of the business, I could be held responsible for the entire $1.5 million. Plus any accrued interest and penalties, Michael confirmed. And they'd likely come after you first if they determined you had more accessible assets. Can I remove myself from the loan? Michael leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk. That depends on several factors. First, we need to determine the current status of the loan. Is it in good standing? Are payments being made on time? Second, what does the loan agreement say about release of co-signers? I shook my head. I don't know. All the statements go directly to the business. We'll need to find out, Michael said. You have a legal right to that information as a co-signer. I can request a complete loan history and current status from the bank. Over the next few days, Michael's office gathered information while I met with my financial advisor, Rachel, to assess my own financial position if the worst were to happen. Based on your current assets and the potential liability, Rachel explained, spreading spreadsheets across her desk, a default on that loan would be devastating. We're talking potential bankruptcy, loss of your apartment, significant damage to your credit score for years to come. The numbers were stark and frightening. Everything I'd worked for could be wiped out by a business decision I had no control over. When Michael called with his findings, the picture became even clearer. The loan is technically current, he explained, but there have been several late payments over the past 8 months. The bank has sent 3 warning letters. I never received any notifications, I said. They were all sent to the business address, which is listed as the primary contact. As the co-signer, you should have been notified of delinquencies, but many banks are lax about that unless the loan goes into actual default. What else? I asked, sensing there was more. Michael sighed. I had my assistant do some basic research on your father's company. There have been several liens filed against them in the past year, and 2 suppliers have initiated legal action for unpaid invoices. The betrayal cut deeper. Not only had my father emotionally excommunicated me from the family, but he'd also hidden serious business problems that put me at financial risk. What are my options? I asked quietly. There's a clause in the loan agreement that allows for release of a cosigner under certain conditions, Michael explained. Primarily, if the business can show sufficient collateral or improved financial position to satisfy the bank that the loan is secure without the additional guarantor. And can they do that? Based on what we're seeing, it's unlikely. But there's another option. Michael leaned forward. The loan agreement includes a material change clause. If there's a significant change in relationship between the co-signers that was not disclosed to the bank, you may have grounds to petition for removal. What kind of change? A dissolution of business partnership, significant dispute between parties, or any change that materially affects the underlying assumptions of the co-signing arrangement. Your father's explicit statement that he's cutting ties with you could qualify, especially if you can demonstrate that this severing of relationship means you no longer have any visibility into or influence over the business operations that affect your financial liability. It was a potential way out, but it wouldn't be simple. What would I need to do? Prepare a formal petition to the bank, including documentation of the changed relationship and explanation of how it affects the co-signing arrangement. We'd need to move quickly before any potential default occurs. I thought about it for a long moment. Taking this step would almost certainly destroy any chance of reconciliation with my father. It would be a definitive statement that I was putting myself first, something I had rarely done in our relationship. But hadn't he already made the first move? Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. His words echoed in my mind. Let's do it, I decided. Draft whatever documents you need. I want my name off that loan. The next week was a flurry of paperwork and legal maneuvering. Michael prepared a comprehensive petition, including copies of my father's text message statements from family members about being told I was cut off, and financial analyses showing the increased risk to me given my now complete lack of involvement with or information about the business. There was a moment the night before we submitted everything when doubt crept in. Was I being too harsh? Too reactionary? Was I burning a bridge that could never be rebuilt? I called Jasmine, who was out of town at a conference. Am I doing the right thing? I asked, my voice small in the darkness of our apartment. Alexandra, she said gently, your father explicitly told you he was cutting ties. He's made it clear that he doesn't see you as family anymore. Why would you remain financially entangled with someone who has rejected you so completely? Put that way, the answer seemed obvious. You're right, I need to protect myself. This isn't about revenge, Jasmine continued. It's about self-preservation. He made his choice, and now you're making yours. The next morning, I signed the final documents in Michael's office. How long will this take? I asked as he gathered the papers. The bank will need to review everything and make a determination. Could be a few days, could be a couple of weeks. I've marked it urgent given the financial implications and requested expedited processing. As I left his office, I felt lighter somehow. For years I had been carrying the weight of my father's approval, his expectations, his judgment. Taking this step to financially disentangle myself felt like setting down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for too long. 3 days later, Michael called. The bank has made a preliminary decision, based on the documentation, provided they're inclined to approve your petition for removal as co-signer. Really, I hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. The loan officer mentioned that they've had their own concerns about the business's financial management. Your petition gave them an opportunity to reassess the entire arrangement. They're requiring your father to provide additional collateral or find a new co-signer within 30 days, or they'll consider the loan terms violated and may call it due. The implications were enormous. If my father couldn't secure additional collateral or find another co-signer, he could be facing a demand for immediate repayment of the entire loan amount. Given the financial issues Michael had uncovered, that seemed unlikely. What happens now? I asked. The bank will notify all parties of their decision. Your father will receive formal communication about the change in terms and the 30-day requirement for additional security. I thanked Michael and hung up, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief at having protected myself, sadness at the finality of the break, and underneath it all, a small, shameful flicker of satisfaction that my father would finally have to face the consequences of his actions. 2 days later, the bank confirmed that they had processed my removal from the loan and had sent formal notification to Walker Construction. I was officially free from the financial entanglement, though I knew the emotional fallout was likely just beginning. I braced myself for the reaction I knew would come, wondering what form it would take and how soon the storm would break. The first call came at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 day after the bank's notification would have reached my father's office. I was in the middle of my morning run along the East River when my phone buzzed in my armband. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize, but the Boston area code gave me a pretty good idea who it might be connected to. I let it go to voicemail. By the time I showered and dressed for work, 3 more missed calls had accumulated, all from different numbers, all with the same area code. I listened to the first voicemail as I made coffee. Miss Walker, this is Harold Perkins, accountant for Walker Construction. There seems to be some confusion with the bank regarding your status as loan guarantor. Please call me back at your earliest convenience to sort this out. His voice was professionally calm, but I could hear the underlying tension. Harold had been my father's accountant for over 20 years. He knew exactly how Richard Walker would react to this development. I didn't return the call. Instead, I headed to work, immersing myself in the quarterly portfolio reviews that had been scheduled for weeks. Around 11 a.m., my assistant knocked on my office door. Alexandra, your brother's called 3 times in the last hour. He says it's urgent. I took a deep breath. Thanks, Jennifer. I'll handle it. I texted Bradley rather than calling in meetings all day. What's up? His response came immediately. What the hell did you do, Dad? Is losing his mind. The bank is threatening to call the loan. I considered how to respond. Finally, I wrote, I removed myself from a financial arrangement with someone who explicitly stated they were cutting ties with me. Business decision. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his reply came through. This isn't just business, this is family. Is it? I responded, because I was very clearly told otherwise. No immediate response came. I put my phone away and returned to my meetings, maintaining a professional demeanor while inside my emotions churned. By lunchtime, my phone showed 12 missed calls from 6 different numbers. Harold Bradley, my father's office, my father's cell, and 2 numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails ranged from professionally concerned Harold to incredulous Bradley to coldly furious my father. Alexandra, this is your father. Whatever game you think you're playing needs to stop immediately. Call me back. No explanation, no apology for his rejection, just a demand for compliance. It was so characteristic that it almost made me laugh. I sent a brief email to Harold, the only one who had maintained a professional tone. Mr. Perkins, I understand you're reaching out regarding the loan guarantee. My attorney has handled all aspects of my removal as co-signer. Please direct any questions to Michael Lambert at Lambert Legal Associates. His contact information is below. Regards, Alexandra Walker. By mid-afternoon, Diane had joined the fray with a scathing text. Your selfishness knows no bounds. Your father built that business to provide for this family, including you. How dare you betray him this way? I didn't respond, but I did forward the message to Michael. He'd advised me to document all communications in case things escalated further. At 3 p.m., my office phone rang. Jennifer's voice came through the intercom. Alexandra, there's an Amanda Walker on line 1. She says she's your sister. I hesitated. Amanda had rarely sought direct contact with me, generally following Diane's lead in keeping me at arm's length. Curiosity won out. Amanda, is everything okay? No, everything is not okay, she snapped. Dad's been in emergency meetings with the bank all day. He came home for lunch looking like he was going to have a heart attack. What are you trying to do to this family? The genuine fear in her voice caught me off guard. I'm not trying to do anything to the family, Amanda. I'm protecting myself financially. From what your own family? God, you're so dramatic. First the big scene at Thanksgiving and now this. I took a measured breath. Amanda, has Dad explained to you what this loan is for, or what my role in it was? A pause. It's for the business expansion. You co-signed it because you work in finance and could help secure better terms. And did he mention that if the business defaulted, I would be personally liable for $1.5 million? Another longer pause. That's not going to happen. Dad's business is solid. Is it? Then why has the bank been sending warning letters about late payments? Why are there liens against company assets? Why are suppliers suing for unpaid invoices? That's not true, but her voice had lost its certainty. Ask Harold Perkins if you don't believe me. Or better yet, ask Dad why he's been hiding financial problems while simultaneously cutting me out of the family. Ask him why I should remain financially liable for a business I have no connection to run by someone who explicitly told me he was cutting ties. Silence stretched between us. I didn't know she finally said, her voice smaller. There's a lot you don't know, Amanda, and that's not your fault. But I'm not the villain in this story. After hanging up, I sat at my desk staring out at the Manhattan skyline. By 5 p.m., the missed call count had reached 23. By the time I left the office at 7, it was up to 35. I switched my phone to Do Not Disturb mode for the subway ride home. When I walked into my apartment, Jasmine was already there cooking dinner. The normality of the scene, her stirring pasta sauce while humming along to music, created a surreal contrast to the chaos unfolding on my silenced phone. "Rough day?" she asked, noting my expression. I showed her my phone screen, 42 missed calls. "Wow," she said, eyes widening. "I'm guessing the bank notification arrived." "Oh yes, the Walker family mobilization is in full effect. Dad Bradley, Amanda Diane Harold, the accountant, probably the family dog if they could teach it to dial." She pulled me into a hug. "Are you okay?" I leaned into her warmth. Strangely, yes. It's almost validating, you know. All these months of silence, and suddenly I'm important enough for 42 calls in one day. "What are you going to do?" I pulled back to look at her. "Nothing. At least not tonight." Michael advised, letting the initial reaction burn itself out before engaging. My phone buzzed again on the counter. We both looked at it. 43, Jasmine noted. By the time we went to bed, the count had reached 56. The next morning I woke to find it had climbed to 68 overnight, including several calls between 2 and 4 a.m. that suggested my father had been up stewing in the dark hours. Among the new voicemails was one from Harold that struck a different tone from his earlier messages. "Miss Walker, this is Harold Perkins again. I think we need to discuss this situation in person. There are aspects of the company's financial position that you may not be aware of that might. Well, please call me at this private number when you can." His voice had lost its professional detachment, replaced by something that sounded almost like concern, not for my father or the business, but for me. I forwarded the message to Michael, who called me back immediately. "This confirms my suspicions," he said. "Harold knows something specific about the business finances that has him worried enough to reach out to you privately. We should meet with him." "Is that wise? He's been my father's accountant forever. His loyalty is to Dad and the company." "Professional ethics might be overriding that loyalty right now," Michael observed. "If he's aware of financial improprieties that could affect you, he may feel obligated to disclose them, especially now that you've taken steps to protect yourself." After some discussion, we agreed that Michael would contact Harold to arrange a meeting on neutral ground. The picture emerging was increasingly concerning. What exactly had my father been hiding about the business, and how bad was the financial situation really? The answers, I suspected, would determine not just the future of my relationship with my family, but potentially my own financial well-being for years to come. The 68 missed calls suddenly seemed less like anger and more like panic, the reaction of someone watching a carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. The coffee shop we chose for the meeting was in Midtown, busy enough to provide anonymity but quiet enough for conversation. I arrived early, securing a corner table away from the main traffic flow. Michael joined me 5 minutes later, his briefcase and calm demeanor providing a sense of structure amidst the emotional chaos of the past few days. "Remember," he advised as we waited, "let me do most of the talking initially. We need information more than we need confrontation right now." I nodded. sipping my latte and watching the door. When my father walked in instead of Harold, my stomach dropped. He wasn't alone. Diane, Bradley, and Amanda followed behind him, a family united in crisis. The only one missing was Harold himself. "Ambush," I murmured to Michael, who straightened in his chair. My father spotted us and marched over, his face set in the stern expression I knew all too well from childhood disappointments. "Alexandra," he said curtly, then nodded to Michael. "You must be the attorney." Michael stood, offering his hand professionally. "Michael Lambert. I was expecting to meet with Mr. Perkins." "Harold works for me," my father replied, ignoring the outstretched hand. "Anything he needs to say can be said to me first." The others arranged themselves around our small table without invitation. Bradley looked uncomfortable. Amanda nervous, Diane coldly triumphant, as if the very fact of this confrontation proved her right about me all along. "We're here to resolve this situation," my father continued, his voice controlled but tight. "This little financial tantrum of yours needs to end immediately." I felt a familiar shrinking sensation, the automatic response to his authoritarian tone that I'd carried since childhood. Michael's subtle shift beside me, moving slightly closer in solidarity, helped me resist it. "Mr. Walker," Michael began, "my client has exercised her legal right to remove herself from a financial obligation after a material change in relationship with the primary borrower. There's nothing to resolve about that status change." "Material change?" my father scoffed. "A family disagreement isn't a material change." "Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties," I quoted his text message quietly. "Those were your exact words, Dad. Not a disagreement, a severing." Diane leaned forward. "Family matters should stay within the family, not be dragged into business." "I agree completely," I replied evenly. "Which is why I removed myself from the family business after being removed from the family." Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "Nobody removed you from the family, Alexandra. Dad was upset about Thanksgiving, that's all." "Upset enough to uninvite me from the reunion and tell the entire extended family he was cutting ties with me," I pointed out. "Upset enough to lie to relatives about why I wouldn't be there." "We needed time," my father insisted. "You sprung your lifestyle on us, without warning, made a scene, and then expected immediate acceptance." I felt my patience wearing thin. "I brought my partner to Thanksgiving dinner. That's not springing anything. And I never expected immediate anything. Just basic respect." Michael gently steered the conversation back to the central issue. "The relationship breakdown is already established. What we need to discuss now is the business situation, Mr. Walker. The bank has indicated serious concerns about the loan status even before Miss Walker's removal as guarantor." My father's expression darkened. "The bank is overreacting to a temporary cash flow issue. Every business has them." "Is that why suppliers are suing for unpaid invoices?" I asked. "Why there are liens against company assets? Why the loan payments have been late multiple times this year?" The flicker of surprise in his eyes confirmed my suspicions. He hadn't expected me to know these details. "Who told you that Harold had no right?" "Harold didn't tell me anything," I interrupted. "But your reaction just confirmed it's true." Bradley looked at our father with confusion. "Dad, is the business in trouble?" "Of course not," he snapped. "It's just the usual challenges of expansion, nothing I haven't handled before." "Then finding another cosigner or providing additional collateral shouldn't be a problem," Michael observed mildly. The silence that followed was telling. Amanda broke it first. "Dad, just tell us what's really going on. How bad is it?" My father's composure finally cracked. "The Westbrook development project has hit significant complications. Environmental issues, permit delays, cost overruns. We're $3 million over budget and at least 8 months behind schedule." The admission hung in the air between us. "The bank has been accommodating because of our long relationship and the personal guarantee," he continued, not looking at me. "Without that, they're threatening to call the loan due in 30 days if we can't secure alternative backing." "And can you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "The business assets are already leveraged," he finally said. "And with the current situation, finding another guarantor is challenging. So, you're saying the business might fail without my guarantee, I clarified. I'm saying your impulsive decision could destroy everything I've built over 30 years, he countered, anger returning. Everything that would have been your inheritance someday, along with Bradley's and Amanda's. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. My inheritance, Dad, you've made it abundantly clear I'm not part of the family future. Why would I believe I'm part of the inheritance plan? This isn't about money, Diane interjected. It's about loyalty. Loyalty goes both ways, I replied. Where was yours when you were telling the entire family I was cut off? Where was yours when you were hiding financial problems that put me at risk? Bradley leaned forward, addressing me directly for the first time. Alexandra, I didn't know about any of this, the family stuff or the business problems. But now that we do, can't we find a solution together? His sincerity seemed genuine, which made the situation even more painful. Had he really been that insulated from the reality of our family dynamics and the business issues? The solution is simple, my father declared. Alexandra reinstates her guarantee, the bank backs off, and we get through this rough patch like we always have. And what do I get in return? I asked. More rejection, more lies, more risk, without information. You get to help your family, he replied, as if that should be enough. Michael intervened. Mr. Walker, you're asking my client to assume significant financial risk with no protection or benefit. That's not a reasonable request, family or not. What would make it reasonable? Bradley asked, looking between us. There must be some arrangement that could work. I considered the question seriously. Was there any scenario in which I would be willing to re-entangle myself financially with my father? Complete transparency, I finally said. Full access to all business financial records, past and present. Regular updates on business operations and financial status. And a formal agreement that outlines my role and protections. And on the personal side, Amanda asked quietly, what would you want from us as family? The question caught me off guard. I'd been focused so exclusively on the financial aspects that I hadn't fully considered what family reconciliation might look like. Respect, I said after a moment. For me, for my choices, for my relationship with Jasmine. No more passive-aggressive comments, no more exclusion, no more lies to the extended family about me. My father's expression hardened. So your conditions include us embracing your lifestyle choices against our beliefs? No, I corrected. My conditions include you treating me with basic human dignity, regardless of whether you personally approve of every aspect of my life. There's a difference. Diane looked at my father. Richard, we can't possibly. He held up his hand to silence her, his eyes never leaving mine. And if we can't meet those conditions, then we continue as we are now, I said simply. Financially and personally separate. Even if it means the business fails. Even if it affects Bradley and Amanda's future. The emotional blackmail was so familiar it almost made me smile. Dad, you're the one who chose to exclude me from the family while keeping me financially obligated to your business. You created this situation, not me. For the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. Not quite understanding, but perhaps the beginning of recognition that his actions had led us here. Bradley broke the tense silence. I think Alexandra's requests are reasonable. We should be transparent about the business if she's taking on risk, and we should treat her with respect because she's family. I don't see why either of those things is controversial. Amanda nodded, though she avoided looking at Diane. I agree. I don't want to lose my sister over this. My father sat back, studying me with new eyes. You've changed, he said finally. The Alexandra I knew would have given in by now. The Alexandra you knew was desperately seeking your approval, I replied honestly. She's gone. I've learned I don't need to set myself on fire to keep other people warm, even family. Another long silence followed. I could almost see the calculations happening behind my father's eyes, weighing pride against practicality, control against potential financial ruin. I need time to consider these terms, he finally said. The bank has given you 30 days, Michael reminded him. That's your timeline. My father stood abruptly. We'll be in touch. He turned to leave, Diane immediately following. Bradley and Amanda lingered, both looking torn. I really didn't know, Bradley said quietly, about any of it. I believe you, I replied. Amanda bit her lip. Will you at least think about coming to the reunion, regardless of what Dad decides about the business stuff? Her request surprised me. Would you want me there? With Jasmine. She nodded hesitantly. I'd like the chance to get to know her properly, without all the tension. It wasn't a full embrace, but it was something, a small crack in the wall that had been built between us. I'll think about it, I promised. After they left, Michael and I sat in silence for a moment. That went differently than expected, he finally said. Yes, I agreed, though I'm not sure if anything will actually change. Ball's in their court now, he observed. But regardless of what they decide, you've stood your ground and protected yourself. That's a win in my book. As we gathered our things to leave, I realized that something fundamental had shifted inside me. For the first time in my relationship with my father, I had set clear boundaries and maintained them in the face of pressure. Whether or not we reached an agreement, I had finally found my voice. Walking out of the coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. The burden of seeking approval from people who couldn't or wouldn't give it had been lifted. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. 3 weeks passed with no word from my father. Bradley texted occasionally with neutral updates about his life, careful small talk that avoided the elephant in the room. Amanda sent a photo of her new puppy, a golden retriever named Sunshine, with the caption, "Would love for you to meet her sometime." These small gestures felt like tender green shoots pushing through hard soil. Not quite reconciliation, but signs of life nonetheless. As the bank's 30-day deadline approached, I found myself surprisingly calm. I had done what I needed to do to protect myself, set clear boundaries about what reconciliation would require, and now the decision rested with my father. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, I wasn't anxiously trying to manage his emotions or anticipate his reactions. The freedom in that realization was profound. Jasmine noticed the change in me. You seem different, she commented one evening as we walked along the Hudson River, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink, more settled somehow. I considered her observation. I think I finally understand that I can't control how others respond to me. I can only control my own choices. That's a hard lesson to learn, she said, squeezing my hand. Especially with family. Especially with my family, I agreed, but it's also liberating. On the 29th day of the bank's deadline, my phone rang with my father's number. I was in a meeting at work but stepped out to take the call, my heart racing despite my resolved calm. Alexandra, his voice sounded different, less commanding, more uncertain. We need to talk, in person. We arranged to meet at a restaurant near my office the next day. I offered to have Michael join us, but my father declined. This isn't just about the business anymore, he said. This is family. The restaurant was upscale but quiet, the kind of place where tables were spaced far enough apart for private conversations. I arrived exactly on time to find my father already seated, a glass of water untouched before him. He stood as I approached, an old-fashioned courtesy that felt strangely formal. You look well, he said, as I took my seat. Thank you, I replied, unsure how to navigate this new awkward politeness between us. The waiter came for our drink orders, creating a momentary reprieve from the tension. Once he left, my father leaned forward slightly. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks, he began. About the business, about our family, about many things. I waited, resisting the urge to fill the silence. The bank called in the loan yesterday, he continued, his voice carefully controlled. Without your guarantee and with our current financial position, they weren't willing to extend terms. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in his business difficulties. He waved away my sympathy. It's forced some difficult decisions, but perhaps necessary ones. I've sold the commercial development division to Westbrook. They're taking over the troubled projects and the associated debt. This was unexpected. The entire division. That was your big expansion plan. Yes, well, sometimes we need to recognize when we've overreached. A hint of his old bitterness crept into his tone, but he visibly reined it in. The core construction business remains solid, smaller but stable. The waiter returned with our drinks, and we ordered food almost at random. both more focused on the conversation than the menu. Alexandra, I owe you an apology, my father said once we were alone again, the words clearly difficult for him. I put you at financial risk without full transparency. That was wrong of me. Coming from a man who rarely admitted error, this was significant. I nodded, acknowledging both the apology and what it must have cost him. And there's more, he continued, looking down at his water glass. The way I reacted to your relationship with Jasmine, the things I said and did. I can't pretend I fully understand your choices, but I had no right to cut you out of the family. I felt a tightness in my throat. Why did you? He sighed deeply. Pride, fear, old-fashioned thinking. Take your pick. He met my eyes directly. When you stood up to me at Thanksgiving, it was like looking at a stranger. The Alexandra I knew always sought my approval, always eventually gave in. This new person who set boundaries and walked away, I didn't know how to respond except with anger. The insight surprised me. I hadn't expected this level of self-awareness from him. And then he continued, when the business started having serious problems, it was easier to keep you at a distance than admit I might need your help. The text about the reunion, I'm not proud of that moment. It hurt, I said simply. I know, and I can't take it back, but I can try to do better going forward. He straightened his shoulders slightly. I've been talking with Bradley and Amanda. They both miss you. Even Diane has recognized that family should come before personal opinions. I raised an eyebrow at that. Diane said that. A small smile crossed his face. Not in those exact words, perhaps, but she's agreed that excluding you from family events is no longer acceptable. And what about Jasmine? Would she be welcome too? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, it may take time for everyone to adjust, but she would be welcome as your partner. It wasn't a wholehearted embrace of my relationship, but it was a significant concession from a man who had previously declared it against his values. What brought about this change? I asked, genuinely curious. Several things, he admitted. Watching the business I built face potential collapse was humbling. Seeing Bradley and Amanda stand up for you made me question my position. And if I'm being completely honest, your ability to walk away showed me that I couldn't control you through financial or emotional leverage anymore. It forced me to consider what I truly valued more, being right or having my daughter in my life. Our food arrived, creating another pause in the conversation. We ate in silence for a few minutes, both processing the significance of what had been said. So what happens now? I finally asked. That depends on you, he replied. I've laid my cards on the table. The business is restructuring. The family would like you back, on your terms of respect and inclusion. But I understand if too much damage has been done. I considered his words carefully. The apology seemed genuine, the concessions significant, especially for a man as proud as my father. But years of emotional manipulation couldn't be erased by one conversation. I'd like to move forward, I said slowly but cautiously. Small steps. Perhaps Amanda's suggestion of attending the family reunion with Jasmine could be a start. Relief visibly washed over his face. The reunion is rescheduled for Labor Day weekend. We'd be honored if you both would come. And the business, I asked. No more requests for financial entanglements. No more, he promised. Though I would value your professional advice from time to time if you're willing to give it, as a daughter, not as a guarantor. It was a small acknowledgement of my expertise, something he had rarely offered before. Over dessert, we talked more concretely about boundaries and expectations going forward. He agreed to family therapy sessions to help navigate the new dynamics. I agreed to occasional Sunday dinners to rebuild relationships gradually. We both acknowledged that trust would take time to reconstruct. As we parted outside the restaurant, he awkwardly offered his hand, then changed his mind and pulled me into a brief, stiff hug, physical affection that had been rare even before our estrangement. I'm proud of the woman you've become, Alexandra, he said quietly. Even when that woman stands against me, perhaps especially then. The words I had longed to hear for decades finally came when I no longer desperately needed them. There was a poetic justice in that, a final lesson about self-worth and external validation. The months that followed brought slow but steady healing. The Labor Day reunion was awkward at times but ultimately successful. Jasmine charmed several of my cousins and formed an unexpected bond with my grandmother over their shared love of gardening. Diane remained somewhat distant but scrupulously polite. Bradley and Amanda made genuine efforts to get to know Jasmine and rebuild their relationships with me. My father and I established a new kind of relationship, not the unconditionally close bond I had once yearned for, but something more honest and balanced. We respected each other's boundaries and found common ground in our shared interest in finance and business strategy. He occasionally asked for my professional opinion on business matters, genuinely listening to my advice rather than seeking rubber stamp approval for decisions already made. Therapy helped me understand that the family I had been so desperate to please had never really seen me clearly. My worth had been tied to my compliance, my ability to fit into predetermined roles. Breaking free from those expectations had been painful but necessary for my authentic self to emerge. I also came to appreciate the chosen family I had built around me. Jasmine, whose unwavering support had given me strength. Stephanie, whose friendship had remained constant through every up and down. Colleagues who valued my professional contributions. And the community of friends who accepted me without conditions or expectations. 1 year after the confrontation in the coffee shop, Jasmine and I hosted a housewarming party in our new Brooklyn brownstone. Among the guests were Bradley and his new girlfriend Amanda, and her now-grown puppy, and most surprisingly my father and Diane. Watching them mingle with my friends and colleagues, I felt a sense of integration I had never thought possible. Later that evening, as the party wound down, my father found me alone in the kitchen. "You've built a good life here," he said, gesturing to encompass the house, the lingering guests, the evidence of happiness surrounding us. "I have," I agreed. "I'm sorry, I almost missed being part of it," he said, the simple statement carrying the weight of all our history. "But you're here now," I replied. "That's what matters." And in that moment, I realized the most profound lesson of my journey: true family, whether blood or chosen, is built on respect, honesty, and the courage to set boundaries. The text that had once felt like ultimate rejection had actually been the beginning of my liberation, the catalyst for growth that had transformed not just me but my entire family dynamic. The simple understood I had sent in response hadn't been an ending but a beginning, the first word in a new language of self-respect that had ultimately taught us all how to communicate more authentically. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ended up transforming your relationships in unexpected ways? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately heal us the most. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding the courage to stand in your truth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's ability to see it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.